so much for joining me again today for another exciting video. So similar to how I talked about my top 5 favorite cleansing methods, I wanted to talk about my top 5 favorite protection methods because I get asked about it a lot, and I totally love that you guys are so interested in protective magic. I think that is awesome, and I'm here to help you and maybe give you some ideas about my practice. These are not all of my methods of protection. Of course, a magician never reveals all of his secrets, right? But legitimately, I just wanted to share some of my more basic ideas, especially for people who are just like, I am overwhelmed, I don't even know where to start. So if that sounds like you, this is the video for you. So the first thing that I am going to recommend to you guys is actually not witchcraft or spell work at all, but that is to do some self-reflection, sit down, and really get real with your personal boundaries. So what are you comfortable with in a given situation and what are you not? Now, I am not saying sit here and list out every situation ever, but in general, if you have a hard boundary, let's say, for not sharing spell work online, you know, that would protect you from practitioners who are trying to learn about and infiltrate your practice and deconstruct it, as well as giving you kind of a sense of privacy. So that is a boundary, for example, that you can have when it comes to approaching witchcraft. Now, in general, I think people should be really honest with themselves about why they are practicing witchcraft and why they are interested in it. So if that is like a conversation you have not really had with yourself, if you're still like at the beginnings of your journey, definitely take some time to sit down and be like, why am I actually, like, what draws me to this, right? Because when you know what you're protecting, you are better able to establish your intention and work in tandem with the rest of your goals. This also can kind of help you be realistic with the avenues of spell work that you choose. So whether you are choosing to do candle magic or use a poppet or make an enchanted oil, whatever that looks like for you, knowing your boundaries when it comes to the type of spell work you're comfortable doing, super helpful in your total witchcraft journey. So know thyself. All right, so that's all well and good. Let's talk about some witchcraft. My second recommendation to everybody is to make yourself a protective amulet. And that is simply something that you wear on your body to protect you. I really like to wear them in necklaces, pendants, beautiful stuff. And this is one of my very protective amulets. It is a sacred symbol, the little pentacle. I enchanted it to protect me. Now, this is a really great time to use protective symbols from your personal practice. So if depending on what pantheon you work with or different deities that you work with, there might be specific symbols that are sacred to them that are also, or were also historically used to protect people who wore them. So awesome. You can make a little spell jar necklace with protective herbs and crystals and stuff. There are tons of people on Etsy who have stuff like that. If you don't want to get all the ingredients to make your own, totally get it. If you're not crafty, no worries. And one of my personal favorites and something that was very accessible to me even as a novice practitioner, unable to share my practice with other people, and I keep having to keep it secret, is to enchant unsuspecting looking jewelry. So to other unsuspecting people, there is nothing witchy about just a random piece of jewelry that you like to wear. And it's really great for kind of keeping that on the DL, but also keeping yourself protected as you are learning about witchcraft and exploring your spirituality. There are different methods, but my personal favorite one is placing the piece, like the necklace or piece of jewelry, in a mix of protective herbs and salts and leaving it under the light of the full moon each month. So I'll say a little prayer over it. There's a little bit more involved, but I encourage you guys to kind of use that framework if you would like to create your own ritual, because I really think that spell work becomes so much more powerful and so much more meaningful when people put their own spin on it. So I'm always happy to share little methods, but I would love for people to make them their own. Yeah. Now, the pros of this method are that it can be really kind of private or unsuspecting, and it can be done without tools. You can do this energetically. If you have access to a pen and paper, you can create a protective sigil. I would use a phrase similar to like, I protect, you know, insert your name here, and using that to create your sigil. You can then place your amulet in that sigil and leave everything out under the full moon as you would with the herbs and salts, but it's just a different method, a different avenue of doing that. So if that's more accessible to you, definitely recommend it. This can also be done as an offering or a working with a deity. So you can petition a deity if you work with them to assist you in doing, in creating a protective amulet. Yes. Now, the cons to this method, it can require tools, and if you are a new practitioner, this might seem a little bit intimidating. I promise you, if you need help, I will be here to help you when I can. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by that method and have questions, feel free to leave them down below and I will get back to you, I promise. Now, that method is super involved, and if you're looking for something a little bit more low energy, something that I do constantly is carry protective crystals. I really like crystals, especially on days that I am feeling a little bit more fatigued, tired, if my mental health isn't doing super great. I just feel like it's just a way for me to connect back with the planet and to call on the specific energies that I need that day, which makes everything in general seem a little bit less intimidating and something that I can manage. So I'm really thankful that I discovered crystals when I did, because I was like, oh, this is perfect. Now, this is one of the more accessible methods, and I do recommend, you know, if you are looking to get some protective crystals, totally go to your metaphysical stores, and there are people there who can absolutely help you. But my personal recommendations are hematite, obsidian, which is my personal favorite, onyx, and black tourmaline. Those are my go-tos. There are tons of other crystals that are protective as well, but the reason that I recommend that you go to a metaphysical store is that you can kind of pick up the different energies of each of these crystals for yourself. So what might work for me may not be super great for you, and that is a-okay. But those are the ones that I personally recommend, and I feel like other practitioners recommend as well. Now let's talk the pros of this method. So again, crystals are relatively accessible. Crystal tumbles are pretty inexpensive. They can be a little bit more expensive at metaphysical stores, admittedly. But once you kind of know what works out the best for you, it's a little bit easier to go online, support our wonderful witchy brothers and sisters all over the globe. They are super easy to carry around without being detected. You can keep them in your purse. Some people put them in their bras or their pocket. Many of these stones are also very grounding, so I do like to have those around me whenever I'm feeling super anxious. So if you struggle with that too, totally feel ya. But the cons of this, of course, is that some people just can't, they don't have the luxury of walking into a metaphysical store or being able to order stuff online, and if it comes in a witchy package, like it might be, I totally get it, and I want to be sensitive to that. So if you gotta wait for the crystals, don't worry, they've been around for a while, so they'll still be there when you are able to start your collection. All right, so let's shift gears and talk a little bit about hearth magic. And my third favorite method of protection magic is, of course, warding. Now, warding is a more permanent method of protection, and it is usually centered around the home or the sacred space, but you can ward anything. Your social media profiles, I've seen people talking about warding their name a lot on TikTok, but you can ward anything that you might need. This is also very helpful for novice practitioners who might want to have a specific place for their tools that they don't want people going into, so they might energetically protect it as well as keeping a nice lock on it. Now, wards come in all sorts of different flavors, if you will. You have home guardians, which I do have a video about, protective plant wards. So if someone casts at you, the plant will absorb that energy and it will take on those effects of whatever baneful magic that is instead of you. You might have an energetic servitor that you create via chaos magic, which is a whole other video in and of itself. Very cool. You might alternatively have different sigils, symbols, or even charms placed around your home to protect it. I personally use a lot of iron nails in my protective works and my home wards. I have wards in every single room of my house. I use symbols to ward my windows so nothing comes through, stuff like that. If you have a symbol that is really sacred to your practice, such as the pentacle or like Thor's hammer or the Eye of Ra or the Ankh or something like that. Though the Ankh is really more about eternal life in the anyways. If you have a symbol like that that is associated with a deity of yours or with a religious path, then having those around your house can help protect it. And that is kind of a low energy ward. I do activate all of my wards with my own personal energy, and that is kind of a visualization of energy transferring from myself to my wards. And I do this because I want anything passing by to recognize not to fuck with me specifically. So far so good, I would like to say. But with home guardians and servitors, they kind of have an energy of their own as well. So there's that. If you want me to talk a little bit more about kind of like home warding, I totally can. I feel like I've talked about it a couple times, so I will try to link some other videos that I've made. But if you wanted me to talk about that like specifically, I absolutely can go through some examples of like warding your home and maybe show you guys some methods. Now, the pros of warding, I mean, everyone should have their sacred space warded, in my personal opinion. And if you don't fret, but maybe finding something like some protective symbols or drawing a sigil to like protect your space, just recommend. But usually home wards are very strong. I mean, for me, they're kind of like the anchor of my home. They stay active for a long period of time and have, at least for me, become part of the energetic ecosystem of my space. Now, some cons to this method: you do have to maintain them energetically. I do infuse my own energy, like I said, into these wards. They can be easily visible in your house. So being careful like where you're placing them, or choosing things that are a little bit less like witchy looking for your home guardians, or, you know, plants, maybe not drawing sigils on the pots, but like underneath the pot or on like the little dish that it sits on, stuff like that. Just some ideas. And also, wards take time, energy, and sometimes tools to make. So it's kind of a bigger commitment, but if you are open to doing that, if you're really into protective magic, home wards are awesome, and I literally cannot have enough, I feel like. And finally, one of the simplest but often overlooked ways of protecting yourself magically is energetically creating a sacred space. Now, you might have heard this being referred to as casting circle. I use that term a lot. I think it is wonderful. But you can also call on the elements, deities, guides, ancestors to surround and protect you. Now, I personally, especially at the beginning of my practice, I would often like visualize armor, like enchanted armor, protective armor, materializing around my body, almost like Iron Man style, which I know is like kind of a weird description, but that's the only one that I really have. And it really provided me a space to not only feel protected, but also to pause and ground myself. So if you are a practitioner who really struggles with anxiety, or are in a situation in which you don't feel safe a lot of the time, number one, please get somewhere safe if you can. But if you are still kind of feeling like, oh my gosh, after you have determined that you are in a physically safe space, creating a protective circle was really helpful to me, especially when I was like in the depths of like abuse and stuff. And while I can't say that it necessarily stopped the abuse that was happening around me, it did help me cope a lot. And it made me feel safe and protected, which was something that was super rare for me growing up. So I really love this method a lot. Now, as a pro for this method, you do not need any tools. It can be used in any situation. And it's really just a great way to ease anxiety and find groundedness, right? But on the other hand, you do need space to be able to concentrate. So if you're kind of like in a really chaotic environment, or there's a lot of stuff going on and you're just like unable to focus, which I totally feel you, like sometimes I just can't. That can just make this method a little bit more difficult, because oftentimes you have to focus on the words that are coming out of your mouth, calling in those energies to feel protected. But in those instances when I am really struggling to concentrate, I will just send up a prayer to a deity, or rely on one of the handy dandy crystals that I have constantly. So yeah, those are just some of my ideas. If that gives you, hopefully it gives you a jumping off point. By no means is that kind of an exhaustive list of how you should be protecting yourself magically. But that's what I have for today. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me, and I'll see you in the next one.